Welcome back. Today we're opening a truly tragic chapter from Hollywood history. It's a story that's not just about crime, really, but about the terrifying power of, well, obsession, control, and exploitation. We're doing a deep dive into the life and the shocking murder of Dorothy Stratten. The sources paint this picture of a young woman, really the definition of a rising star, a natural beauty whose ascent was just meteoric. But her life was catastrophically cut short in 1980. And this deep dive, it feels necessary because her case is such a profound study in how vulnerability can be weaponized. We're going to trace her journey from, a naive girl working up in Canada to the glamorous lights of Los Angeles, and really examine the precise mechanisms of control that led to her brutal end. We understand this material is intense, and we're approaching this deep dive with the seriousness it absolutely deserves. Before we get started, if you appreciate this kind of in-depth look at challenging stories, please do take a moment. Follow, like, share, and subscribe to the Horror Doc channel. It helps us keep bringing you these deep dives. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Dorothy Stratten. Born in Vancouver, British Columbia back in 1960, she grew up in a difficult environment. Vancouver's East Side, known for hardship, homelessness, addiction issues, it was tough. By 14, she was already working part-time at a Dairy Queen. Sources describe her as shy, maybe a little awkward back then, trying to support her single mother. And it was there. In 1978, in her red Dairy Queen uniform, that 17-year-old Dorothy was spotted by Paul Snyder.
And that meeting, it really defines everything that follows, doesn't it? Snyder, he was 26 at the time. And he wasn't just some local promoter guy. Sources are pretty clear. He ran women. He was known locally as the chubby pimp. Mm-hmm. He wore that whole persona, the black Corvette, the mink coat, gold chains. It was like this immediate badge of, success, even if it was a bit shallow.
Exactly. And when he saw Dorothy, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, just naturally stunning, he didn't see a girl. The sources explicitly state he immediately calculated her worth. Saw her as a money tool, like a rough diamond he could polish up and, cash in on.
What's crucial here, I think, is how that calculation was sort of hidden behind this instant gratification he offered her. Dorothy apparently lacked self-confidence. Reports say peers mocked her for her height, her features. So Paul's strategy was textbook, really. Immediate, lavish attention, expensive meals, designer clothes, setting her up in an apartment in a much richer area. For her 18th birthday, he bought her this huge blue topaz diamond ring.
He wasn't just spending money, though. He was engineering a dependency, wasn't he? Showing her this world that she, as a minimum wage worker from a difficult background, could never have accessed on her own. And that creates this profound sense of indebtedness, trust even.
Yeah, it solidified his role in her mind as her benefactor. It ensured that any control he exercised later, she'd likely perceive it as guidance,
right,
not manipulation. Mm-hmm. That dependency completely masked his deeply calculated intent.
And that calculated intent, it had one clear destination: Playboy magazine, specifically their 25th anniversary Playmate search. Paul was absolutely convinced Dorothy had the charisma, the look. He thought she could be the next Marilyn Monroe. But Dorothy herself was hesitant. Sources say she was incredibly shy. Her ambition, she just wanted to be a secretary. It apparently took Paul 2 full weeks just to persuade her to pose nude for the first time. And even though she was awkward during that initial shoot, the photos, they captured something, this beautiful, natural, girl-next-door innocence. Playboy immediately loved it. There was a hurdle right away, though. She was only 18, and the minimum age for a playmate back then was 19.
That's a fascinating detail, isn't it? It shows Paul pushing boundaries right from the start. Mm-hmm. He actually had to convince Dorothy's mother to sign consent forms, just so Dorothy could fly down to Los Angeles and work with Playboy. So that control mechanism, it was already extending to her family, too.
Right. And even though she was initially deemed, quote, too young and innocent to actually win the Playmate of the Year title that first time, Hugh Hefner was personally captivated. He signed her immediately as a Playboy model, moved her to Los Angeles, and this is the moment the cage really started to close around her. Paul followed her down there instantly, appointed himself her personal manager, and took complete control. Her schedule, her weight, her clothes, her money. He even banned her from smoking. Total control.
And here's where we see some, let's say, institutional awareness of the danger. Sources indicate Hefner recognized Paul for what he was. He saw him as a pimp, basically, capitalizing on her life. And he explicitly warned Dorothy not to marry the guy.
But Dorothy, she trusted Paul completely by this point. If she saw him as the source of all her success, why listen to an outsider? Even Hefner, she genuinely credited Paul with everything.
Precisely. If she believed her entire new life, her worth came from him, then defying him meant risking everything. She saw him as a guardian, a benefactor, not a captor. which is why, despite all the warnings, she married Paul in Las Vegas in June 1979. And for Paul, the sources are clear. This wasn't about love. It was a purely transactional move, securing his financial future, his connection to her success.
And that transaction, it paid off almost instantly for him. By 1980, Dorothy wasn't just a model. She was named Playmate of the Year. That came with huge prizes. $100,000 cash, a Jaguar car, furs. Paul immediately seized control of all of it. Bought himself a Mercedes-Benz, moved them into a bigger, more lavish home. Plus, her acting career took off. She starred in that sci-fi film Galaxina. But this success, it became a double-edged sword for Paul, didn't it? Hefner got tired of Paul mismanaging Dorothy's money, and his behavior at the mansion, apparently harassing other women, so Hefner stripped Paul of his title as her manager and banned him from the Playboy mansion and the club altogether.
And once his access to that power structure to Hefner was cut off, the mask just fell away. Paul was furious. He started verbally abusing Dorothy in public, criticizing her constantly, becoming intensely pathologically jealous of her male co-stars. His control was slipping.
And that slipping control turned into outright failure in October 1980. That's when Dorothy met the famous director Peter Bogdanovich. At a Playboy mansion party, ironically, Peter was immediately smitten. He actually created a new role just for her in his upcoming film, They All Left. So while they were filming in New York, Dorothy and Peter, they fell deeply in love. And the contrast between him and Paul must have been just stark, immediate, undeniable. Peter was, by all accounts, warm, a gentleman, respected her. He didn't control or command her like Paul did.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is that Peter didn't just offer romance. He offered validation. Validation of her as a person, her inner self, not just her appearance. Yeah. And through that relationship, she finally realized the horror of her situation with Paul. She saw that he had essentially trained her, groomed her to sell herself, using her charm, her beauty, but always to advance his interests, not her own. That whole benefactor image completely shattered for her.
And that realization, it seems, gave her the strength she needed. She chose Peter. She decided to end the marriage with Paul. She refused to let Paul join her in New York while filming, claiming the crew barred family members. A clear signal. Then she wrote him this decisive letter asking for a divorce, stating clearly that she felt controlled, suffocated, and desperately needed to be released. She used the phrase, needing to free the bird from the cage.
That phrase, free the bird, knowing what happens, it's just chilling. Paul's reaction was, well, immediate fury. This wasn't about losing a wife for him. It was about losing his meal ticket, his entire identity, his income stream, everything.
Absolutely. When she returned to LA, she tried to cut off all contact. Paul just immediately spiraled, started draining their joint bank accounts, spending wildly, selling off her assets, the Jaguar, her awards, even a gold-plated jacuzzi they had just for quick cash. He even hired a private investigator, not just to track her, but specifically to gather evidence of infidelity with Peter. Why? So he could sue them both for money in court. His motivation was purely financial destruction and revenge. Now, despite repeated warnings from both Hefner and Peter Bogdanovich, people who saw the danger Dorothy felt, well, profound guilt, she just couldn't shake the memory of the man who first discovered her, who gave her that first chance. She wanted this separation to be amicable, clean, and that guilt, that kindness, it proved fatal. She agreed to meet Paul one last time, on August 14th, 1980, at his rented house. The plan was to finalize the separation details, and she was going to offer him $10,000 cash as a down payment for him to find a new place, an olive branch.
It's just devastating, isn't it? To realize that her fundamental kindness, her desire for a peaceful end, it was leveraged as the final point of access by her killer.
So let's focus now on that tragic day. August 14th, 1980, Dorothy arrived at Paul's rented house around noon. Paul had two roommates living there at the time. One was Stephen Kushner. The other was actually a 17-year-old girl. Paul was reportedly trying to groom as the next Dorothy. They both left the house shortly after Dorothy arrived, supposedly to give the couple privacy to talk. By 8 p.m. that evening, the roommates returned. They saw Dorothy's car still parked outside. The bedroom door was locked from the inside. They apparently assumed the couple had perhaps reconciled or were having a long discussion. But late that night, things took a sinister turn. Paul's private investigator called Stephen Kushner, one of the roommates. He sounded worried, asking if Paul was okay because he hadn't been able to reach him all evening, which was unusual. That call, combined with the locked door, it raised alarm bells. Around 11 p.m., Stephen and the young girl decided they had to get into that room. They forced the locked bedroom door open. The scene they found was horrific, just unimaginable. Two nude bodies, submerged in blood. Dorothy was on the floor. Reports mentioned extensive full-body bruising, suggesting a violent struggle. Paul was on the bed. The shotgun he'd used was lying next to him. Both had suffered catastrophic head wounds.
The forensic details that emerged later, They confirmed the brutal calculation involved. The autopsy suggested Dorothy was likely murdered within just an hour of her arrival, maybe even sooner. And critically, that $10,000 in cash she'd brought, it was found untouched, still inside her purse. There was no negotiation, no discussion about separation terms. It was immediate violence.
And we have to address the extreme nature of the violence itself. It speaks volumes about Paul's need for total, final control, even in death.
Yes, the evidence confirmed a severe assault and rape occurred before he shot her. And then, shockingly, almost beyond comprehension, Paul sexually assaulted her body again after she was already dead, before eventually, about an hour later, based on estimates, turning the shotgun on himself. That post-mortem assault. It's the ultimate, final, horrifying act of dominance and rage, a sign that he couldn't possess her in life, so he desecrated her in death.
Friends later revealed just how unhinged Paul had become in those final weeks. He had bought that 12-gauge shotgun, telling people it was for hunting. But that was a lie. He had actually been seen parked outside Peter Bogdanovich's mansion days before, just sitting there. Apparently, his original plan was to kill both Peter and Dorothy there. The meeting on August 14th. It wasn't a negotiation. It was just a change of venue for his pre-planned murder-suicide. The impact of this tragedy on Hollywood and on those who knew Dorothy was just profound, utterly devastating. Peter Bogdanovich was completely heartbroken. Sources say he required hospitalization due to the sheer grief and shock. He stopped working for a significant time afterwards. He focused on caring for Dorothy's mother and her younger sister Louise, who was only 12 at the time. Peter often said he would never love anyone the way he loved Dorothy. He highlighted not just her beauty, but her immense talent and fundamentally good nature.
And the fallout, it remained controversial for years after. Peter later wrote a memoir. It was called The Killing of a Unicorn. In it, he heavily criticized Hugh Hefner and the whole Playboy environment, suggesting that the culture of exploitation there contributed, at least indirectly, to her death, and perhaps most famously or infamously, depending on your view. 8 years after Dorothy's murder, Peter married Louise, Dorothy's younger sister. She was 20 at the time. That remains a point of discussion even today.
Ultimately, as Hugh Hefner himself noted after her death, Dorothy Stratten was a rare kind of woman, beautiful inside and out. But tragically, perhaps just too kind-hearted, too trusting, to truly recognize the evil intentions lurking beneath Paul Snider's carefully constructed facade. Her story serves as this chilling, cautionary tale about the blinding trust we sometimes place in those who promise us success or escape. Before we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought, based on everything we've discussed from the sources. Considering Paul Snider was clearly already unstable, already possessive and controlling, what influence, if any, do you think the intense public scrutiny, the pressure cooker of instant celebrity lifestyle, what effect did that have on accelerating his possessive nature, his destructive final spiral? It's a heavy question to consider. Thank you for following this very intense story with us here on The Deep Dive. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth analysis of challenging narratives, please, again, take a moment to follow, like, share, and subscribe to the Horror Doc channel. Your support really does help us continue this work. We will return with another deep dive very soon.